present you with our basically our microservices strategy. Casper and I are both pre-sales, taking care of API management projects. So if any questions arise from a technical point of view, just come up to us and we'll try to help you. So what are we going to do over the next hour or so? Well, I'm going to take maybe 5 or 10 minutes to give you a brief API management update about the classical products that we are offering and why we're doing it and who we are. The big chunk of the speech this morning will be done by Casso, who will first of all introduce our view on microservices approach, which are the possibilities, which are the challenges and the pitfalls, which are the methodologies. After that, Casso will pass into the Axway offering within that domain. He will give you an insight in our strategy with respect to microservices. And if time permits, we'll see about that. We'll leave the floor for some Q&A, but that we'll see in terms of time. So, as I said, for 5 or 10 minutes, I will give you a bit of an introduction into our current product offering. First of all, I think it's safe to say, we all know it, that since the introduction of mobile devices a few years ago, that has really led to the explosion of demand for APIs and API consumers. Now, we're not only talking about mobile devices, think about smartphones, but we're also these days talking about wearables, about Internet of Things that is introducing in a very fast pace, bots and so forth and so on. This shift in technology, let's say, an end-user technology, really has induced a shift in customer experience, in customer expectations. Typical end-user customer, let me talk about that, is not happy anymore with having to go to five sites in order to be able to arrange a journey, to go to a flight, to an airport, an airline flight site, to look for hotels. Customers these days expect things like Expedia, where they have one application facing them, regardless of the channel, regardless of the fact that this customer-facing thing is a mobile app or a complete website. But this customer wants an experience where he wants to arrange his journey, his flights, his taxis, his hotel in one go. Yeah. Now, this shift in consumer experience has really forced the companies that offer travel, that offer flights, that offer hotels, and any company amongst us, to think of in another way when it comes to their approach to channels by which they are reaching their customers. Yeah. Whereas the classical, let's say, the traditional companies go for a site which is company-centric, maybe a mobile app which is company-centric. Customers these days are wanting a different approach, which forces these companies, the companies that we're all talking about, to move away from this enterprise-centric approach and go towards a customer-centric approach, and then we're coming into the domain of the customer experience networks. Customers want totally different experiences, which is basically the big source for this growing need for APIs. Now, APIs, it's all very nice. The thing is that if you look about APIs today, we're not talking about, let's say, the classical B2B paradigm anymore. It's still around, but that's not what we're talking about now. In the classic B2B paradigm, you had really contracts between two companies saying, okay, this is the way we're going to communicate, we're going to do B2B, AD-fact or whatever, and we know who we are. If you look at the API space, well, the company over there doesn't really have a direct connection with the end user anymore necessarily. So there can be all kinds of calls coming into their APIs that need to be secured in one way or another. And that's where the API management comes into the picture. So in between or in front of your classical front ends, which may already be restified or not, but in any case, in front of your classical back end, you want some kind of a front end that allows you to do things like threat protection. You want to make sure that SQL injection is put out of the way, that you cannot experience denial of service attacks. You also want all kinds of security possibilities, authentication, authorization, encryption, signing, those kind of things all have to be handled in the layer in the middle there. But that's only, let's say, the technical nitty-gritty on the bottom of it. Where it really becomes interesting is when we start to talk about API management, where we are talking about API enablement. And API enablement means that you will facilitate the life of those potential developers out there, the guys that are working for some kind of a company, that are willing to use your API to add value to that like the Expedias, for example, to add value to that. You have to make life easy for these developers. So you need things like an API catalog. An API catalog where a potential developer that you may or may not necessarily know already, but this potential developer can browse through a catalog of APIs that you expose. The documentation is there. You can see, okay, what is this? What can I expect from this API? He also has the possibility to try it in a sandbox. Okay, this is an API that I would like to use. I want to use it. I want to try it in a sandbox. Those are the things that you have to enable on top of, let's say, the technical nitty-gritty, the classical gateway on the bottom over there. So when you talk about the API catalog, we talk about an API portal, which is easy to use for these potential developers, and that's a big change. Whereas in the classical enterprise-centric approach, the end user that was in mind by those companies was really the end user. We want a nice website with a nice web shop in order to attract a potential traveler. Here you're thinking about, you want to attract those developers. You want to make life easy for those developers that will use your API and develop an application of their own for their customers. So that's kind of a mind shift. And quite obviously, all these things have to be managed and monitored in a convenient way, so that you can always know about technical problems and issues, quite obviously, but also that you can have an idea of the engagement of your developers, of your potential developers. I have an API, there is an application over there, how much is it used? Do we attract customers with that? That kind of an insight is what you are looking for. So that's the big idea. So what does Axway have to provide in that? Okay, so let's take it from the bottom up. The lowest level component that we offer today is the API gateway, here on the bottom. The API gateway has been around for several years, ever since we acquired Vordel. And the API gateway is the heavy lift. That's the component that does all the stuff, that executes policies. That's basically what it does. Now that's a technical thing. That's the basis of our offering within API management today. But on top of that, we have this API management layer, which takes it a level further, which takes it towards a more business audience, whereby you will specify proxies, for example. You say, I have a kind of a backend API sitting over here. I don't care where it is, but I have a Swagger definition or even a WSDL definition if you talk about classical web services. And the idea is that you say, okay, I'm a product manager, so to speak, could be, and I want to use this API that's internal to us, and I want to expose it to the outside world. I want to create a proxy, and the problem is, what kind of policies do I want to apply? What kind of security do I need? What kind of enrichment do I want? What kind of routing policy do I want to adopt? That's what we're doing over there. So we are creating an API which adheres to all the requirements of your company in terms of security, in terms of authentication and authorization, what you may have. And the next thing is that you will take that API and share it. Share it with who? Well, share it with those potential developers out there. Yeah? So you will share an API depending on the number of organizations. So you will be able to take your community of developers and group them in what we call organizations. So that you say, okay, here is a group of developers that belongs to partner X, so to speak. We are going to put them in an organization, and through that organization they have access to API A, B, C. And we have another organization. An organization is just an internal name. Another organization with other developers that have access to C, D, and E, for example. Yeah? And in the same time, you take it one step further. Whatever you do out there, when you create your API, when you organize your APIs in organizations, and you allow access to those APIs to certain developers, you are putting that information at the disposal of those developers via the API portal. A nice front end sitting in your DMZ typically that will show you the catalog, that will allow you to onboard your developers, give them access to a catalog of APIs, and try it, and finally, and that's the big aim of it, register a potential application. So I'm a developer, I'm looking at your catalog and saying, oh, this API, I've tried it, this is the one I need. Okay, I will use, I don't know, a OAuth, for example. And you will create a client ID, an old client ID, and you go back, your application is registered, you go back, you do your thing, you're developing your mobile app or whatever it may be, but when your customers are invoking your APIs, you will always know which application is responsible for that invocation through things like a client ID or an API or something like that. So this is the middle part of our offering, the API gateway, the heavy lifter, and the API management function layer on top of that. So I was talking about appetizing backend APIs. They can of course be your classical backends, be it in the cloud or on-premise, if they expose REST or SOAP services, or even some other stuff. We have also adapters to, for example, query databases, so to speak. Yeah. So those can all be attacked. What we also have in the domain here is what a component called API Builder. API Builder is, I would call it a RAD environment. You know, we all know about rapid application development. This is kind of a rapid API development environment. What API Builder allows you to do is through the use of a number of connectors. So within the API Builder space, we have a number of connectors at our disposal. Connectors like Salesforce, Marketo, all kinds of cloud stuff, or even things like databases. And what you will do is you will, let's say, specify which kind of information you're looking for from that and that and that application. You will specify during a web interface. And we're not talking about development over here. You will specify what kind of information you need, how you want to congregate that information, and what kind of an interface you want to expose to the outside world. So at the end of the day, well, at the end of the hour, I should say, when you have been working with API Builder, you will, in a rapid API development manner, have created a REST API, which is getting this information from these connectors out there, be it cloud or other. Yeah? So that's the API Builder. And last but not least, we have quite obviously a very important component, as you already have guessed, the API Portal. The API Portal, as I mentioned, is the component facing the potential developer that will use your API to develop his own applications and add value to your APIs. And maybe you will be able to monetize on whatever he is doing, or throttle because that person is a bronze customer, or leave the throttle open because he's a gold customer. Those are the things you can think about in terms of usages. Okay, let me not dwell too long time on that. Now, API management and Axway, that's a long story and a nice one. First of all, Axway hasn't been around for 2 weeks. Axway has been around for maybe 20 or 25 years now. We have a nice palmarès of the biggest customers in the world. During the last 2 years, we added 150 new logos to our portfolio, and so forth. So we are an independent software vendor. Independent in the sense that we have our own products, we develop our own products, and sometimes we team up with other companies to add components to our strategy. If we talk about form factors, I've been talking about the API gateway, the real runtime thing that we are talking about. Now that runtime gateway, the API gateway, we do not really care where it runs. What do I mean by that? Well, it can be a classical binary install on-premise, like we always have in there. It can also be a on-site, on-premise, Kubernetes/Docker container-based approach. We can deploy the same thing over there. It can be hosted on things like Amazon, where you are just using Amazon as an infrastructure service, Amazon, Azure, whatever you may have, you can install and run our binaries back there. Or it can even be our own cloud service. We have an own platform as a service offering, an Axway cloud service, whereby we basically offer you a set of functionality and a service level agreement in order for us to operate your API management environment. Important thing to notice is that in all these form factors, we are always using exactly the same code base. It is not like we have a different product for binary installs and a different product for, I don't know, Docker and Kubernetes. It is exactly the same binary code that we are executing. Which means that if you are thinking of migrating from one approach to another, from ground to cloud, or from binary install to Docker approach, that the migration is heavily facilitated, because basically all the policies that you have defined, all the APIs that you have created can just be migrated without any rework or recoding or redevelopment of any kind. Well, yeah, we're talking about API management. One of the big issues within API management is security, quite obviously. You want to be protected against DoD attacks and those kind of things, but also you want always to know who is talking to you, authorization, authentication, encryption, signing, those kind of things are of prime importance to API management. Now you must know that security is in our genes. The product API Gateway has the first versions which were purely a security gateway. That was its function, to be a security gateway, a policy enforcement point. Now the product has quite obviously evolved. We have built on top of that, but still, security is at the heart of the matter. It is in our genes. And last but not least, it's not like we have just a product that you install and you have to work all the things around it. We have a full API lifecycle stack. First of all, we fully support the DevOps environment. We have the necessary possibilities to integrate with things like Jenkins, Artifactory, what have you. Those things are there. But also, we are not just delivering a policy or just an API. We are delivering the complete lifecycle round trip from developing policies via creating APIs, virtualizing APIs, towards developing mobile applications. That is something also that we have in our stack, and all the way around back. Okay, well, that was the last slide for me. I now leave the word to my friend and colleague Sue, who will let you in on all the secrets of
microservices.
Voilà, exactly.
Thank you, Peter. So now we are going to discuss about the next episode of the API management. It is just about the microservices, and you will see next in the slide that the microservices are not something that are coming from nothing. The microservices are just a continuum of what we are doing now in the API management space, and it is just the continuation of what is being doing in the API management stuff. But it is a shift, and it is the next episode of the digital transformation, and we will see what is behind the scene. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. What is a microservice? A microservice basically is a service. First of all, is a service loosely coupled, yes, but with a bounded context. And the bounded context is really important, because the microservice is supposed to do something well, but just a part of something. And last but not least, it should be autonomous. And autonomous is another word in the microservice world. Bounding context and autonomous, the microservice should be autonomous. And when I say autonomous, is the full stack should be autonomous. So when you evolve your data, maybe in a database, you shouldn't impact another microservice that is deployed. When you make evolve your application server, if you make evolve your application server for a microservice, the neighbor should not be impacted by the maintenance that you are doing. And the autonomous is very important. Why this? Why this? We have been in avionics. It's a good analogy, because if you take the example of an aeroplane, to build an aeroplane, it's involved with many dealers, and those who will deal with motors, those who will deal with cockpit, etc. And they are very specialized in their area, and they just do it very well, but it is not the full story of an airplane. And this is exactly what we want to achieve for a microservice. Just do something, but the things that we do is a part of something else. And the something else is the business effort and is the business value of it. And at the end, let's say what Boeing or what Airbus want to sell to others is an aeroplane, not the motor, not the air, or not the cockpit. And these microservices are a variant of APIs. So I know for those who are purists, you will tell me that APIs are not microservices and so on. But let's simplify the wording. Microservices are a variant of APIs. Behind the scene, we know that it is not the same technology. We know that so it is not totally at the same level, but in the API world, microservices are a variant of APIs. So, why microservices? Why are we talking about microservices, and why now? So I'm just showing this slide. This slide is based on Google Trends to show you the reason why we are talking about microservices. And we made a combination of those three words: microservices, API gateway, and digital transformation. And we see during the last 15 years how those three words evolved in Google Trends. And you will see, and let's say if I take the digital transformation, and let's see the digital transformation, it's get evolving. And those three words are get evolving, with the same trends, but this one is more and more. So this one is bigger than the others. And this one, what is this one? This one is microservices. And you will see that before 2013, microservices was just 0. And can someone tell me what happened in 2013? Docker. Docker started in 2013. And Docker is one of the basement of microservices. So why microservices and why now? First of all, we have, for microservices, we have the technology that has come mature. Docker is the important pillar of it. And just along with Docker, we have now some other technologies. Kubernetes is one of them, and we will go on detail later. But the stack, the technology stack is mature. And this technology stack, the reason why we are talking, we are now talking about microservices is also because the technology is mature, and it makes things happen to move to a smaller granularity. The second thing that you have to keep in mind, and Peter introduced this, is the customer experience network. Today, when you focus on the customer experience, your customer doesn't care where are the services. So it could be on site, it could be so at your premise, but it could be also just outside your IT, and it could be at the edge of your IT. And if you want to provide value to the customer, you have to integrate, and you need to work with this world, to this ecosystem, and you need to make your IT able to move to the edge. And this is very important because I'm pretty sure that most of you well know the ESBs and those SOA technology. But the main difference between what we are doing now with API management and SOA technology is just so the technology is another part, but we have moved from the internal to external, and the communication, the interaction are either internal, but they are hybrid, internal, external, and so on. The customer experience network is very important, and the last one, the third reason why we are talking microservices now is the agility of the business. For API management, we also talk about the agility of our business, but here, in that case, for microservices, is the agility of business at another granularity. And the granularity is changing. So, having said that, the microservices, so it's something, so if you go and read about microservices on internet, is a quite simple concept, but the architecture is complex. The architecture is really complex, and we will go. We will deep dive on the architecture behind the microservices, but it is really hard to manage by yourself. So, what are the challenges behind the microservices? The first challenge of microservices. So, if you go in detail, the first challenge. We talk about the security pedigree. The first challenge in microservice world is about the security. If you deploy, so if you are lucky to deploy microservices, you will face the security constraint and how to manage that the communication inter microservices are completely secured. And are completely secured in a uniform way. So the microservice security is a concern. The second challenge that we have managing microservices is about the governance of both microservices, and by governance we have governance in two ways. We have the security ways of governance, but we have also the monitoring way of governance. You want to see, when you deploy a microservice, how could you see what's happened in your systems? It's quite basic, but for microservices, it is not basic. If you build a microservice infrastructure, if you don't care about the monitoring, then you will be lost. The first challenge for microservices is by nature. If you want to build a microservices infrastructure, or if you want to run with a microservices strategy, you should be DevOps ready. Because you will have thousands of microservices, hundreds of microservices, with many variants, with many versions, and if you are not DevOps ready, then you will be lost. And last but not least, one of the other challenges for microservices is a concern regarding the network and the topology. If you want your microservice to be autonomous, it underlies something on the network side and on the infra. It underlies that the microservice to be distributed and to be resilient, just to be on a resilient infrastructure. And this is really hard to manage. So you are still with me? Okay. Okay, what's happened in a traditional way of managing our services and our API management? And Jeremy told you about Jeremy introduced the API management, and Peter also talked about the API management. This is currently how we manage the APIs, and we call it the north-south traffic, and it is very easy to understand. You have your consumer here, and you have your resources here, and in between you have your API management, which will be the middleware that will intermediate between your consumer and your resources, and that will provide the monitoring and the security of your services, and that will be the entry point of your partner, etc., etc. And under your API management stack, what we call an edge API gateway, you will have an orchestration layer. And Peter showed you the orchestration layer. It's the builder. And the builder, the role of the builder is to do a mashup of your services. So you can maybe you need to combine your services and to arrange your services in a way the business wants, and to do that you will need to orchestrate your basic services. So we call it the orchestration and mediation layer, and this role is the role of the API builder that Peter has shown. And this is the classical way of managing microservices. Of managing APIs. But with microservices, it's different. Along with the north-south traffic, you will have also to manage the east-west traffic. What is the east-west traffic? Is the traffic between the different zones of microservices. When you deploy on a microservice infra, you will have different infra, you will have different zone, network zone, and you will have different combination, even with APIs. And there are different challenges. This is a microservice. The communication between this microservice and this microservice is a challenge. How do you manage security for this communication? And how do you monitor the way this one has consumed this one? Is a challenge at this level. And in that zone, in that domain, you will have also to manage the communication, the inter-domain communication. And we call it the domain edge communication. So you have two types of communication to manage and to secure as well. This one for microservices, and this one for domain intercommunication. And if ever you have already started with API management, you will also have to manage that. And this is what we call the east-west traffic. And to be able to manage that, let's go back. Okay, to be able to manage that, you need two things. The first one is what we call a control plane. A control plane is just a kind of cockpit from where you could deploy your configuration in your microservices, and from when you can gather information coming from those microservices to manage your topology. And it is also a place where you will have the ability as well to manage your traditional APIs. And you have different use cases in that case. You could be typically 100% on-premise, but in most of the cases, you are hybrid. You have one side of this control plane on the just in the cloud, because microservices could be also part of the cloud, and you have one portion of your control on-premise. This is how we manage the east-west traffic, and you see it is more complex than managing the north-south traffic. So, how do we approach microservices at Axway? So when we started with the journey, the microservices journey, we decided a couple of things, but mainly we decide to build something that we call API Central, and you will see in the internet or in the last release that it had been renamed Amplify Central, but it's the same thing. It's a control plane. We decided when we started the journey 18 months back that we will build a component called API Central that will be in charge of doing a couple of things. Something that is not easy with a microservice, because it is distributed by nature, is the registry. How do you locate a microservices wherever it is deployed? And so we decided to build that API Central with one very important function is the microservices registry. And the second thing that we decide when we started with the microservices journey is to be able, and the way we ambition the microservices management is to let the customer focus on the business logic. And when you are a microservice developer, you don't have to care about security. You don't have to care about monitoring. You don't have to care about telemetry. You don't have to care about all those things. You just have to care about your business logic. And we decided to build an infra. We decided to build an infra that will be able to wrap around your microservices and to manage the way that microservice interact with the others. And this is what we call microservices gateway. And last, the microservices are communicating in different zones, and to be able to protect those zones, we need to have what we call a project edge gateway. And you know the projected gateway. The projected gateway is typically an API gateway. And the project edge gateway could be, the edge gateway could be internal here, or could be also at the edge external. And this is our ambition when we started the microservices journey, and we were able to achieve that. And this is how we achieved that. The control plane. Here is the control plane, and the control plane is called API Central. This is a macro view of the complete. This is the macro view of the control plane. The control plane comprises of mainly two things: the API catalog, because so the control plane is that part that will be exposed to the consumers, and the consumers, what the consumer wants, they want the API catalog. So the control plane comprises of the API catalog is the place where you have all your services, but because we are working with microservices, we need a service registry. Why do we need a service registry? Because the microservices are located everywhere. And to be able to manage those microservices, we have deployed, we have built something called the Axway mesh agent. And we are using the service mesh pattern. And what we call the Axway mesh agent is in fact a package that will be deployed in in a container, and that will configure some one component called Istio, and an Istio in the microservices architecture is well known, but I will go in detail on the role of each service. And this agent will manage this component and this component, and this is where your data are deployed. So you have a container, you have a microservice, you deploy a microservice somewhere, and you don't care about the way the network and the way the microservices are communicating. This will take care of this, and this is the add value of Axway. You don't need to think about it. We take care of it. And we take care of it in such a way that we are able to configure what is in your container to manage microservices. And now let's talk about those two components. The first component is called a sidecar. So in the microservice terminology, and today is a standard. And if you want to manage microservices in such a way that you don't want to, you don't want to be intrusive, the best technology right now is what we call the sidecar. And the main role of the sidecar is to be able to discover. Because you deploy your service, because you have deployed your service in a container, the main role of a sidecar is to be able to observe the way the container interact and to be able to discover your service. And once your service has been discovered, because when you deploy a web service, when you deploy a microservice, you deploy it in the container, and it will be registered somewhere to say, oh, hello, I am a new microservices, and this is what I'm doing. And when you get that, you will be able to deploy some enforcement policies to manage the way your microservices communicate with each other. And you will be able to control also the way your microservice get outside. And this is the role of Envoy. So Envoy in the microservices architecture is typically a proxy, a guest proxy. And this one is what we call the local control plane. And it will plug on the container registry and monitor the traffic and just observe what is going on the container. And once a service has been registered, then we'll configure with all those configuration files the way the service interacts with the HTML. So, and what we do at Axway is to package that to you. So when what we call in fact what we call a mesh agent manage this one in terms of configuration and manage also this one in terms of configuration. And this is how it works. you have what I have said. I don't see it. Okay. Okay. So in the API Central here, you have what we call the SaaS control plane. And just remember, the SaaS control plane gets the client registry here, and also get the microservices registry. So this means that you will have here your client, your consumer that are registered here. You will have also the catalog, the way the services you have decided it should be public, and the services you want to share with others, and you have also that microservice registry. And that microservice registry is based on the mesh agent. Because every time you deploy here, so every time you deploy a microservice, then you will have the mesh agent that will that will asynchronously declare to the microservice registry that there is a new service here. And this is the role of the this is the role of the mesh agent. To do the service discovery here, to plug on Istio here, and to get the observation of a new service, and be able to declare that new service to the microservice registry. And if that service disappears, okay, no worry. If that service disappears here and has been redeclared here, you will have also, in the same way, the service discovery that will redeclare that service on another address here. And this is the way we link the control with the data plane that will be deployed at the customer side. And so at the customer side, you have also an on-premise control plane, which is basically Istio. And so Istio is managing that box in which the microservices is deployed, and Istio manage also the way that box talk to others, and it is based on Kubernetes. And one of the basement of our strategy, the mesh agent, is based on basically on three components. The first one is the orchestration engine, Kubernetes. The second is what we call the sidecar, called Istio, and the third one is what we call the proxy, is Envoy. And our stack, the mesh agent, is based on those three components. And this is how we build our microservice container for managing all those microservices that are deployed here. And what will happen behind the scene? What will happen behind the scene? Sorry. Is first the mesh agent. So the first thing that you need to do is to be able to deploy the mesh agent. 5 minutes? Okay, so I jump directly here. Okay. Okay, what's happened? So behind the scene, and this gives you a summary of what's happened. First of all, the first thing that you do is to register on a tenant the control plane. First thing that you do, and once you register, you will declare your microservice. You will say, let's say, I want to manage this microservice. This will be declared in the catalog here. But at this stage, your microservice is not up and running. The next thing that you will do is to build that microservice, and we can accelerate the way you build or you design your microservices because we are partnering with Istio. Once you have built your microservice, your next step will be to deploy that microservices and on your Kubernetes container. But just along with that deployment, before we have deployed and installed what we call the mesh agent on that Kubernetes, on that Kubernetes container. And because we have deployed it, once the micro service has been deployed, so it gets so when you deploy a microservice here, you register that microservice with your Kubernetes, and then it is triggered by Istio. And because we are controlling Istio, then we can get the meaning of that microservice and declare it now to the central console. And this is the way we trap the fact that the microservice is deployed. And then, once the microservice is being deployed, then that's it. It's available, you configure the policy and so on, stuff like that, and that's it. So, I have completed with the other scenario. This is how it looks like in the real life, in the hybrid configuration. We have basically something that we call the edge gateway, and the edge gateway is basically an API gateway. You will have behind the scene something that we call the mesh agent, and we provide at Axway the mesh agent, and we provide also the edge gateway. And this is how we do it. Okay. Do I have time to make the conclusion?
Well, any question for?
Any question at this stage?
Check the questions, but I'll
Okay.
Just one quick question. You say you are using Istio and so Kubernetes.
Yeah.
So how do you integrate with an existing legacy microservice?
So you think about Spring Boot or stuff like that?
Yes, something that is actually existing but not in a Docker way or...
Okay. So, yeah, I know that there are a lot of early adopters of microservices, but it is important to be based on something that is on something that is industrialized. And we have made the choice for our governance strategy to be based on the stack Kubernetes, Istio, and Envoy. But for those existing customers who are on maybe on Spring Boot or Spring Cloud, then there is another way of doing that, but it is through the API management, but not through the API console. Not through the API Central. Because one of the prerequisites of the API Central for managing the microservices is to be based on Kubernetes and Istio.
So for that, if you want to manage a hybrid landscape, SAP in the back end.
Sorry?
So you want to manage something that is more hybrid, not just basically open source within this environment. If you want to manage, for example, SAP, SAP.
Yeah.
You have integrations with that. There are adapted SAP.
Yeah, but if let's take the example of SAP. SAP, for instance, if you have a microservice architecture based on SAP, and somewhere you so at the end, what you deliver as interface is a REST interface, basically an API, and that API will be managed by the API management console. Yes. But we won't monitor so any kind of service that are not on the stack that we have presented.
Yes, but SAP has this full stack, all the information management is back there. I'm also thinking about, for example, getting all of the services exposed on the SAP gateway.
Yeah?
The SAP gateway, they won't, the SAP will still use that, they won't change.
Which SAP gateway are you talking about? The NetWeaver gateway or? Yeah, the NetWeaver gateway. Okay, the NetWeaver gateway will at last deliver a REST service, and this REST service is on OData format, and this one is delivered. So this one is registered on the API management part, not on the microservice part, but on the API management part.
Can we maybe take it during lunch or something?
Yeah.
Because our program stick to. We'll be happy to respond to your questions. We'll be here around during lunch or whatever, so then we can discuss in all serenity, let's say.
Okay, thank you.
Tu veux que je passe les slides? Non, il faudra que tu me dises.
Bah, si vous, du coup, vous voulez faire.
C'est le nom. Ouais. Donc moi j'ai les slides en version PowerPoint.